6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John. These are the same three who will enter the Garden of Gethsemane with him. When times got tough, it was Peter, James, and John with Jesus. Jesus had a core group. And he led them up to a high mountain apart by themselves. So it's emphasizing the other disciples are not there. And it doesn't say what mountain that is, but many people think it is Mount Tabor in central Israel. And he was transfigured before them. It's hard to know what that word means, transfigured. Turns out the Greek word there is one you'd recognize. It says he was metamorphosized. He underwent some kind of change. And you have to use your imagination. You have to use your spiritual imagination. Somehow, all of a sudden, across a crowded room on a high mountain, Jesus seemed different. Then it describes what it looked like. His clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah and Moses. Now that's interesting. There's so many reasons why it could have been Elijah and Moses. Does it suggest that with Jesus is Moses, who represents the law, and Elijah, who represents the prophets? So they're there to say Jesus is the fulfillment of the Hebrew Scriptures, the law and the prophets. Is it because there were legends that said Moses never died? Back in Deuteronomy, it says that no one knows where Moses is buried. And some people said he never actually died. It also says in 2 Kings that Elijah was taken into heaven with a band of angels in a chariot. So the legend was Elijah never died. So two great saints who never died are back with Jesus. And they're talking with Jesus. Then Peter, and Peter represents us in this story. Peter is the human voice. Peter says, Rabbi, that's how we refer to Jesus. It's good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings. Let us make some structures. Let us put something up so we can hold this and capture it and keep this experience forever. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He did not know what to say because he was terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them. And from the cloud there came a voice, the same voice that came during Jesus' baptism, saying the same words. This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him. And suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So let's get our bearings. This is the first Sunday of Lent. Lent means long. Lent is from the same old word that we get length. Lent is an old Germanic word for spring because the days are getting longer. That's the small hope we have, isn't it, right now?
Amen.
Lent is an old word for spring, and it means length, getting longer. Lent began this past Wednesday, but this past Tuesday was another special day. And sometimes, Ramsey, they call it Fat Tuesday. Fat Tuesday. And there's a French word for that, Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras. And on Mardi Gras, you're supposed to cut loose and let it rip. On Mardi Gras, you have a carnival. Now, I'm into words. You understand that, right? So carnival, what does that mean? Carnival means vale, which is an old Latin word for farewell. Vale. Vale to carne. Farewell to meat for 40 days. Because in the old days, you would abstain from eating meat for 40 days. Carnival means farewell to meat. But on that Tuesday, you eat as much as you can. Carnival is a time for a wholehearted celebration of creation, of the fact that the Lord made the world to be very good and things taste good. And it's fun to sing and dance and have a parade and dress up in costumes. Mardi Gras is a celebration of being alive. And as the creation story in the Bible in Genesis 1 reminds us, this beautiful, wonderful creation relies on the maintenance of healthy boundaries. Genesis 1 says, the Lord made the day and the night, and the Lord made the sun and the moon, and the Lord made morning and evening. And in between the lines of Genesis 1, it says that if you live life within the lines, if you live life respecting the boundaries, you can have everything good. So the carnival of Mardi Gras, the feast, the sweetness was always wedded to a fast. That is, you get your Mardi Gras, but guess what happens the next day? You're supposed to begin to respect boundaries and do without. Now, it's so interesting that the word for a kind of low-key amusement park in the parking lot of some place is a carnival. Because what we've done is we've suggested that you could have carnival every day if you go to the right place. And amusement parks are kind of like ongoing carnival. But you know, the old rhythm says you get a feast, but you also have to have a fast. Carnival was originally tied to doing without. You get to celebrate, but only if you do the work of reflection and abstinence. And it's so interesting, our culture wants to suggest, oh, you can go to carnival anytime, just pay money. But deep down, you understand the rhythm of the Spirit is the carnival and the Lent go together. The feast and the fast. Then we had Ash Wednesday. We had a beautiful Ash Wednesday service here, if I may say so myself. And will someone agree with me who was here? Now, on Ash Wednesday, here's what we did. Thanks to John List, we had the palm fronds from last year's Palm Sunday, and he waited for them to dry, and then he burned them in his garage. And so we had black ashes, and I mixed them with a little Wesson oil. Although I promised, I told the people it was special sanctified holy oil. But you need something to kind of hold those ashes together. And then we put on each other's foreheads a cross. And the meaning of that was, we are going to own up to our faults. We're not going to hide from them. We're not going to pretend we're perfect. We're not going to act as if nothing's wrong. We're going to say, here I am, with all my faults. I wear them, and by the grace of God, I want to do better. That's what we said to each other. And at the end, we passed each other the peace. We looked at each other and said, I see your cross. I see your flaws. I see your faults. And I still affirm my love for you and God's love for all of us. You know, in the weekdays, there's a recovery group that meets here. Are you aware of that? A 12-step recovery group? Well, you know, church is really a recovery group. Church is the group of people who say, I'm a sinner. I want to follow Jesus. And we walk in here acknowledging that, not hiding it. And we go on the journey together. So now, 40 days of Lent, not counting the Sundays. If you ever tried to do the math, Lent is 40 days from Ash Wednesday to Holy Saturday. But you don't count the Sundays as part of the 40. Because each Sunday is supposed to be a mini Easter. And if you have made some Lenten vow that you wouldn't eat chocolate, who would do that? Guess what? On Sundays, you get a day off from any Lenten vow. Because Sunday is supposed to be a mini Easter. Every Sunday during Lent is a day off, a little R&R from some TLC, for some TLC. And that's what our story today represents. Jesus is in the thick of things. He's wandering around with the disciples, teaching them, and that was hard work to teach them. Jesus is walking around and the crowds are following him. Everybody wants something. People just touch the hem of his garment. People want healing. They want food. They're coming to Jesus. Jesus is so busy in the thick of things, and then sometimes he has to escape to get into the thin of things. The thin of things. And so he goes up to a high mountain. Are we good? Now, the Transfiguration then represents a mountaintop experience, a peak experience. You know, there's a fancy word for it, an epiphany. And another word for it is an exuberance. The times when the wind just picks you up and lifts you. When I think about these peak experiences, often for me they involve family. I can remember times as a child just being a cousin all scrunched up on a couch with way too many people and feeling like I wasn't even me anymore. I was just part of one big body of family. So held, so loved, so full of affection. And at times like that, it was as if even the members of our family who had passed on were still with us. A kind of peak experience. We know peak experiences when we're in love. That's what they make all the money off these songs on the radio about. And even old timers like us can remember the feeling of those songs. And they still move us because of those mountaintop experiences, those peak experiences that stay with us. We can reach a peak experience through art or reading, many different things. We can reach peak experiences through sitting by our grandchildren. It just feels good. Do you know, Ramsey, you have that much power? That if you're just sitting by your grandfather, it makes him happy. Can you believe it? Peak experiences. I hope every now and then you have a peak experience in worship. So the question is, how do we respond to these peak experiences, these mountaintops? Peter is so human, he's just like us. when they have a peak experience, Peter wants to do something about it. Peter wants to build something. Peter wants to make a structure and keep that peak experience bottled so he can always have it. But it's like trying to pin down a butterfly. You can create the structure for your euphoria, but it will lose. What do I want to say? I'm thinking of a soda. It will lose the taste. It will go flat. And of course, all through history of faith, people have been trying to grasp and cage Jesus and say, I had an experience with Jesus once. I'm going to hold on to that and just keep having that one over and over again. But Jesus says no. You have your exuberances. You have your peak experiences. You are to be grateful for them. They transform you, and then you have to let them go. You know, it's so interesting. Peter basically wants to take a selfie with Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. But what happens when you take a picture of everything you do? You put something between you and the experience. But we're so much like that. When we have those beautiful times, we want to hold on to them and put them in a frame. But they're not to be photographed. They are to be felt. To live alive, awake and grateful. That's why God gives us these moments of inspiration. But not just to hold on to them. Because then we have to come down from the mountain. So today we're having one of our little Easters as we celebrate this text of the Transfiguration. And maybe by God's grace, we'll receive some encouragement and inspiration in this service. But whatever happens here, we're not supposed to stay here. We're supposed to come down from the mountain and follow Jesus through 40 days of testing and struggle. This story is about something that happened on Mount Tabor 2,000 years ago. This story of the Transfiguration is about Lent and Easter. In a way, this story is about all of life. That we would live awake to God, have peak experiences, but then come down from the mountain to follow, to walk that lonesome valley for 40 days, 40 nights. But as we walk that lonesome valley, there is one who will stand by us, because we never walk alone. And just hear him play this song and you'll be reminded about that. Silver song of a lark. Walk on the wind, walk on through the rain. Though your dreams get tossed and blown, walk on with hope in your heart. Amen.